Craig Miller, thanks so much for coming on the Happiest Retirees podcast.
Ryan, you're welcome, except you may have me on the wrong podcast because I don't know how happy I am, and I definitely don't think of myself as retired.
Yeah, well, and I should say, so you don't really consider yourself retired, and you were still nice enough to come on the podcast anyway, right?
I am very nice, and I don't consider myself retired. That's correct.
Yes, both of those are true.
Depending on who you ask, I'm very nice.
What if we ask your wife? What would she say?
Under duress, she'd probably say I'm pretty nice. Yeah.
Okay. Well, tell me a little bit about your story, because I thought you'd still be great on the show, even though you don't consider yourself retired, because you have had like a pretty big life shift. Tell me a little bit about your story, your origin story.
In terms of my career, really goes back to when I was like in my early high school years. I'd already given up my dream of becoming a goalie in the NHL at that point. So, and I became absolutely smitten with the guys I heard on the radio. And I say guys only because it was mostly guys at that time. We're talking, late 60s, early 70s. And I just idolized the disc jockeys and the newscasters, that I heard on my, and this was the era of, AM top 40 radio,
Yeah.
2020 news, and so I have to do that. It's something, just a switch went on in me, and I said, this is what I have to do. So so I started pursuing it. I started, the scene the scene in American Graffiti where Richard Dreyfuss goes to see Wolfman Jack, and I did that. I was that guy, except
Really?
not because I was looking for a lost girlfriend, but because I just wanted to get to know these guys and how all of this worked. And the local guys in Syracuse were extremely gracious. I think partly because those air shifts can get a little lonely.
They were happy you were there, right?
Yeah. So they would let me hang out with them, and I got more and more into it, and eventually by the time I was 17, I had my first commercial. My first job in commercial radio as a weekend disc jockey, and
Really? At 17?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it took it's not long after that, graduated from high school, went into the service, did a stint in the Army with Armed Forces Radio, which is by that time was already called American Forces Radio. So instead of Good Morning Vietnam, I was Good Morning Frankfurt. I was stationed in Germany.
Okay.
In the middle 70s. Did that for a few years. Got out. Stop me if this is too much.
No.
Went to college I hadn't been to college yet. Had no plans originally to go to college. Who needs college to be a disc jockey, right? So, but I had this thing called the GI Bill, which was a use it or lose it sort of proposition. You had so many years to use the benefits, or they were gone. So I decided, I got a college degree. So I threw darts at the course catalog, and it came up, business and economics. I thought that was the most broadly applicable thing. So I did that, got a degree in business and economics at the same time, because I was working in broadcasting the whole time I was going to college.
Oh, really? You were doing
I made
it
the
all.
transition. Yeah. I was going to college full time and working part time, first in radio, and then I also made the transition into television. Got my first job as a local television news reporter. And then, after I graduated, started working my way up through the markets, went to Pittsburgh from Rochester, where I was at the time. I went to Pittsburgh and then finally to San Francisco, and where I spent most of my career out there. Yeah.
I'm always so fascinated. I'm kind of a radio junkie, like it sounds like you were, but I'm one thing I've noticed about radio guys is they're they know exactly all the city. Like I was here, I was at KW, da 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 da. Like it's like a sacred journey.
Oh yeah, I can do that. It would be boring, but I could go through the whole litany.
Yeah. And did you
Yeah.
say so? When you were in college, was one of your studies was journalism or no?
Nope.
No.
By that time, I was already pretty steeped in broadcasting. I saw no reason to study communications or broadcasting. I was already doing it professionally. So
Yeah.
I thought, well, I mean, what's really going to be, because the thing about middle market radio, which is where I was at the time, is it's a revolving door. There is no job security. And I
Yeah.
thought, well, I better have a fallback, and that's
Yeah.
really why I went to college, is so I would be equipped to do something else if this radio thing didn't work out.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Isn't there a saying? I'm probably going to get it wrong, but something like if you haven't been fired, you haven't worked in radio, or something
if
like
you
that,
haven't
right?
been fired 3 times, you haven't really worked in radio, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Everyone's always getting fired. Like even the top talent seemed,
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And the same might be said for TV news, local TV news, by the way. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I've never been quite so I interview people. Obviously, I'm interviewing you. I write, but I'm not like a journalist. So without going to journalism school, how were you a journal? Like what does that mean?
How does that happen?
Yeah.
I took a few journalism courses, a couple journalism courses in high school, which is where I
Okay.
got my first dose of it, and I had an excellent journalism teacher, and I really I kind of took to it. I guess I had a natural affinity for writing, which helps,
Yeah.
which is still what I do, and
Yeah, and by the way, I like your
mhm,
writing.
mhm.
I was reading one of your articles and I like your style.
Thank you. Yes, acerbic.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah.
then the next dose of that would have been when I was doing that weekend disc jockey. There were a gig, in Auburn, New York. There were times, and you're the guy, you're the person sitting there running the station, at that point. There's nobody else around. So when it comes to be news time, a lot of times, after the news guy did his shift and went home, I had to do the newscasts as well. So I was, ripping and
Oh,
reading wire copy. When it used to come off the, when they
yeah.
still had those, yeah, and doing a little bit of writing around that. And I found that I really enjoyed that. And I probably was better at it than I was at being a disc jockey, which is a
Oh,
very,
okay.
very specific kind of talent. And I was okay as a disc jockey, but not great. And I really, like, fortunately, I came to realize that early enough to save myself and moved over. So
Yeah.
my first exposure to journalism was really in radio news.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which I find radio news, I mean, I don't listen to it as much now because I work from home and I'm not I'm not in
Yeah.
the car, which is but I always found it more informative than TV news in some ways. I think because there were less bells and whistles. It was like the person had to really be good at the news. I don't know if that makes
Well,
sense to
at
you.
that time, it was extremely immediate. It was the only
Yeah.
immediate source of news. There was no social media. There were no 24-hour news, stations or channels. There was no cable. There was barely radio.
Yeah.
Marconi and I were best friends.
Yeah, right.
You know, but but there, you either waited for the 6 o'clock news, or you turned on the radio when something
Yeah.
happened, when something big was
Right.
happening. Yeah.
Because the radio was
So.
always on, so that was your
Mhm.
faster than waiting for Walter Cronkite or something,
Exactly. It
right?
was faster, and something else about that I always retained, and that's why I eventually moved back into radio from TV. Is I never got over my real love for the fact that it's there are no visuals. It's the theater of the mind. When you're
Yeah.
on radio, you have to create, like if you're listening to NPR and you're having one of those driveway moments, they call them,
Yeah.
where you're already home, but you're sitting in the driveway, you want to hear the end of this story. You're creating the pictures in your own mind. And I love that. I love that about radio. Whereas TV, you're spoon fed all of the images, sometimes
Yeah.
ad nauseum.
Yes.
Like, like
Some
when something's happened, you're watching CNN and they keep looping the same 15 seconds of, video over and over again forever, you know.
yes.
Yeah, so I love that about radio. I think it's actually more flexible. It has more possibilities than things that involve video. I've always loved that about it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that about looping those clips. I used to work at my first job out of college. I worked at Entertainment Tonight. You know the
Okay.
and so it was back. This was back in 2000, so things were a lot less digital then. And so, like,
Mm,
say, like they wanted to talk about what George Clooney had for breakfast or something. I had to go down to the dingy tape vault and find like 5 clips of him showing up to award shows so they could like loop them,
right. Right.
So that
Right.
yeah, I know exactly what,
Yeah.
what you're talking about
Right.
there.
In radio,
Yeah,
all you do is paint the pictures with your own copy, and in TV they call it natural sound, and radio they call it ambi for ambient sound, right? And
yeah.
so what you weave those things together with your own writing and everything, and you paint that picture for the listener. Yeah, I
I
like
think
that.
Ira Glass said, I might get the quote wrong, but something to the effect of audio is the most visual medium, which I
Pretty
think is
much what I've
great.
been saying.
Yeah,
Pretty much what
exactly.
I've been
Yeah,
saying. Yeah,
he probably
yeah.
took it from you.
I'm sure he
Is what I'm
did.
getting
Yeah,
at.
because I've been widely imitated by people like Ira Glass and
We all
no,
know
I
it.
mean
Yes.
he
List those places again. You started in Auburn?
first radio job weekends in WMBO in Auburn, New York, and then briefly another job in Watertown, New York, WOTT. Before I said, okay, time to enlist and get some more experience here. Then Armed Forces Radio, then WROC in Rochester, New York, then WWWG in Rochester, New York. This is all radio. And then jump to TV, WOKR, Channel 13, the ABC affiliate in Rochester. And then from there, it gets a little more compressed and went to KDKA in Pittsburgh, the Channel 2, the CBS affiliate, and from there to KPIX in San Francisco, the CBS affiliate. And then, oh my God, this opens a can of worms. And then I went through a period where I wasn't in uh, television news at all. I was doing documentary work
Oh,
and reporting for CNN and MSNBC and even producing shows for Home and Garden Television for a while before finally going back into radio when KQED in 2008 KQED called me up, and I'd done some documentary work in climate, which
okay.
we're finally getting around to, like what I specialize in now, and KQED, the news director, called me up and said he was familiar with some of that work, and he said, we're starting a whole new initiative here called Climate Watch, in which it's a multi-platform. All we're going to do is talk about the climate and cover climate science and everything. How would you like to come in and ramp that up for us and run it? And I said, oh hell yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah.
So you were already an expert in it when they asked. That's why they're asking you.
Expert would be stretching the point, but
Okay.
I had a keen interest and a little bit of experience in reading the science, reporting it out, and producing programs about it. Yeah,
Okay.
at that point. Yeah,
I listen to, so I live in Los Angeles, but I listen to KQED
I'm
sometimes
sorry.
with oh, right, the typical Bay Area attitude for
Right,
LA.
right, right.
But
Go
yeah, so I
Giants. Yeah.
I think Marissa Lagos and Scott Schaefer, they seem to be the names that I know. I don't know if
My
they were there.
pals.
Oh, really? Oh,
Oh
okay.
yeah, yeah. Two
Oh,
wonderful people who are
yeah,
both
they're
still
really
there.
talented.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do a great job. Yeah, I love listening to them, but
Scott will never leave. Scott will be carried out feet first. And yeah, Marissa's also great. Yeah,
yeah.
they're two of their top political people. Yeah,
Yeah, they really ask great questions.
yep.
So that was when you were at KQD, and I did want to get into some of those climate documentaries that you mentioned.
Hmm.
I think you did one on the Sacramento River, which you called the
Hmm.
most important watershed for all of California.
Yeah, no, there's no question about it. I mean, it starts up near the Oregon border, and and flows for 300 miles down to San Francisco Bay, and nourishes the whole like Sacramento San Joaquin Delta on the way. People don't know this. People,
Yeah.
even in California, people don't know, how
Yeah.
critical the Sacramento River is. So I did this, documentary for the public station in Sacramento, KVIE, called Sacramento River of Life. And then I also did a couple of other. I did a piece specifically on climate change, uh, and another one, and then things that are related to that, called Region at Risk, which is about the flood risk, from the atmospheric rivers, and things, and also in the
And
Sacramento region.
from the same river,
Sacramento
like
has a whole colorful history of flooding. Well, and
ah,
yes, the Sacramento River flows right through, but the entire inland valley of California, I mean, was seasonally, at least, before they built all the dams and levees and everything else, it was an inland sea for part
ah,
of the year. When the rains would come in the wintertime, and much of it was flooded routinely. And then during the gold rush, it got worse because the guys who were up in the Sierras, the Sierra, washing all these tailings and spoils from their hydraulic mining, where they blasted away whole hillsides with pressurized water. That would all come down the rivers and into the Central Valley, and farmers would wake up and their fields would be, covered with what they called slickens, this, muck that would be washed down the rivers, and ultimately, actually the farmers got together and sued the gold miners, and it ended up, it led to some of the first environmental regulations and watershed protections in America, maybe anywhere.
really?
Yeah.
So the gold rush led to that basically.
Well, partly, yeah. Led to a
Partly.
lot of
Yeah.
other things too,
Yes.
yeah. But
Yeah.
some, not all good. But yeah, no, that was one outcome of it. Yeah, is
Okay.
they started protecting the rivers, protecting the watersheds for the first time. Really, it was a landmark court decision over this.
Can you and tell me, this is such a question I never thought I'd be able to ask somebody. Why is it sometimes when
Can't wait.
humans build dams, it's bad for the environment, but when a beaver builds a dam, it's good? Is that true?
Well, let's start with the fact that beaver dams are much smaller.
That's true.
They're pretty ambitious critters, but overall, beavers are actually great for the ecosystems. They
Oh,
where you build big dams and you put them on rivers in a place like California to, let's say, generate hydroelectricity and also store water for when there's a drought or for irrigation. Many of the dams in California were built specifically to hold water for irrigation because it only rains for half the year in most
yeah.
of California, right? So,
Yeah.
but the one consequence of that, the only problem with that is that anadromous fish like salmon, they have to get up those rivers to breed.
Yeah.
And so when you start putting all of those dams in the way, you start endangering the salmon populations. And salmon is a key player, in the web of life,
Yeah.
in the coastal, river systems and out at sea as well. So.
And for my dinner menu weekly.
That's right. I mean, most of the salmon you eat these days around the country is farmed.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. That's because the salmon populations, partly because the salmon populations out west have been so dramatically reduced over the years by mostly, I want to say, by human development. In fact, this year again, I just read they may have to curtail or cancel the salmon season once again because of populations crashing.
Oh. Okay,
So
so through a lot of this science reporting and these documentaries, you ended up winning the AAAS Kavli Science Journalism Award. Did I say
yeah,
that right?
that's actually one of the most gratifying things that's happened in my career, and that wasn't me. That was a team of people I was working with. We won that as a team that produced a program for KQED on rising sea levels
Oh,
on the West Coast.
okay.
So directly connected with climate change, yeah. And I was very pleased and honored that we actually did. It's a very coveted international science journalism award. Um, but
Wow.
Yeah, and it was given out for a top. I mean, we were so ahead of our time. I mean, I started covering climate change intensively in 2008, and
Oh,
right after Al Gore came out with his Inconvenient Truth documentary, and people were just beginning to pay attention to it, and there was a tremendous amount of skepticism, and practically every post we put on our blog got trolled and pushed
yeah.
back on and poo-pooed and but everything that the scientists have been telling us since at least 1988, when Jim Hansen went before Congress and was really the first time that brought it to broad public attention that there was this greenhouse effect that was going to be a problem if we kept burning fossil fuels. Here's what the consequences are likely to be. They've been right. I mean,
Yeah.
if anything, scientists have underestimated the impact
Oh,
of climate change over the years in their projections. Yeah, there's been no, there are people who think it's alarmism. I actually think it's the opposite. I think that if anything, the problem has been understated for too many years, and now we're really behind the eight ball.
yeah, and I'll say just for myself, like it's something that I'm worried about, but I'm almost so worried about it that I avoid it, which is not, I know, not a good response.
Well, but it's a very typical response,
Yeah.
because and it's become an issue in climate journalism too. We've kind of figured out a few years ago. First of all, the scientists figured out that just giving people more information doesn't help.
Yeah.
Then journalists figured out that just giving people gloom and doom doesn't help,
Yeah.
because people will tune that out at some point. The topic fatigue sets in, and also a sense of futility. It's like,
Yeah.
well, if there's nothing I can do about this, why should we
Right.
try to do anything? Let's just go with the flow and see if we can survive it. Um,
Yeah.
so there's been a lot of attention in recent years to climate solutions reporting. Where we actually try to write about ways to confront this. That it's not too late, although we're getting close.
Yeah.
It's not too late. We're approaching these tipping points that have been talked about, but we have the technology and we have the means to turn things around. We just have to have the political will, which is what's lacking. Not just here, I should say, but globally.
I'm sure. Well, and if little, it's like in life, little steps are sometimes the way to go because they don't seem as overwhelming. And my local city
Yeah.
of West Hollywood, they gave all the residences composting bins, so it's kind of
Hmm.
easy for me to just like throw my vegetables in there, and that's just a small thing. I'm not going to save the world, but it's something.
Can't hurt.
Yeah,
you know.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But
So
what we need, unfortunately, a lot of, you hear a lot of this, well, if everybody did this, it would reduce carbon emissions but the problem with that is always that everybody's not going to do it. And
right.
so what we need are, sweeping, broad policy measures to get things rolling.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you and I are
You
going
can
to
change all
solve
the
it here
light bulbs
today.
you want, but it's right.
Right, right,
Oh, aren't we
exactly,
good?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
after this interview, the world is fine. Okay,
Good.
so I wanted to
Looking
talk
forward to that.
also a little bit. You've also, like you mentioned, you did a series on HGTV. I think it was called House Detective.
Yes, that was
Tell me about
the
that.
aforementioned home and garden. So I'm trying to remember like how this even came about, but um, I had already been hosting a program called 20th Century Home, and I met up with a guy named Todd Easton he came out of ABC News. That was his background, and he was now producing cable programs like the kind you see on HGTV, and so we started, because I had a little bit of experience with it. He said, how do you scale this up,
Yeah.
because you can't really make any money doing one-off specials, how do we get something going, that's going to generate some income and do some good. And I think I was the one who said we have to come up with the cops of home and garden.
Yes. That's a great
You know,
pitch.
we have to so in other words, It's whatever it is. We don't have to make it happen. It's already happening. You know, all we have to
Yeah.
do is go follow them around with a camera and document it. You know, and make it interesting along the way. You know, using various techniques. You know, and then what we came up with was home inspectors. You know,
Okay.
we thought that would be kind of the ideal. To follow these guys around, you know, these are the guys who usually in the process of a sale, you know, or listing, a real estate listing, they go around and, you know, they find the dark underbelly, you know, the lurking monsters, you know, in these houses, sometimes for the buyer, sometimes for the seller. Sometimes sellers want to have an inspection so they know, you know, what might come up, you know, when buyers come in, they start negotiating and finding things. And so they can maybe fix them preemptively. So
Yeah.
yeah, we actually, you know, we sold the idea to Home and Garden Television, and we did 2 or 3 seasons of this show, House Detective, and that was pretty much So I was involved with 2 different programs and a series of specials with Home and Garden Television, and yeah, then I went back into reporting pretty much.
Were you like the host of the show? Were you on camera or for
Mhm.
House Detectives? Oh, you were. You were the host.
No, I was the host of 20th Century Home,
Oh,
which was
okay.
sort of like, you know, how the home of the future, you know, which morphed into really a show about sustainable construction. You
Oh,
know, and
really?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And yeah, because
Interesting.
there's only so many, you know, gadgets and you can, you know, review or go over, you know, things you can talk about how to make the house more intelligent. There are a lot more now, but at the time we were doing this, it was just in its infancy, you know,
Yeah.
home automation and that sort of thing, you know. So it ended up being a show, much to my satisfaction, you know, about green building and sustainable construction and renovations and that sort of thing. House Detective was hosted by a guy named John Daly, who was a
Oh.
professional TV host and
Oh,
did a
okay.
great job for us. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say the golfer. He seemed like he wouldn't have done a great job at
Well,
that.
he is an avid golfer,
Yeah. Oh,
but
okay.
but not that golfer. Yeah.
Okay. Wait, so also you've been a narrator for some programs that maybe you didn't even produce, right? For the Discovery Channel, Travel Channel.
Yes, I have done a range of voiceover work over the years. Some program and documentary narration, a little bit of commercial, and a lot of industrial. You know,
Okay.
when corporations, you know, produce training videos or things like that.
Oh, the ones that
My
we all
proudest
have to go sit through, right?
Yes, right. Or a lot of times they're marketing videos.
Oh,
You know, I used to do a number of those. Um, my proudest moment was probably being able to say, "Meow Mix, cats ask for it by name." So,
wow. I'm
so
definitely gonna use that clip.
I wasn't I wasn't the voice on the national commercials, but I did a corporate for them, and I got to say that tag. One of my favorite taglines.
That's amazing.
So I'm still available for voiceover work. You know, please call this number.
A lot of our listeners are big travelers. Did you do when you did the Travel Channel stuff, like, what kinda shows did you do?
Ridiculous.
Ridiculous?
Ridiculous. Yeah.
What is that?
There were
What is that?
a lot of the shows were things like, oh God, they had this top 10 series where you know, there's like the top 10 craziest roller coasters and the top 10 monster trucks and the top 10, you know, and so I did a bunch of those. Now this is going back a ways, you know, and I did. I remember doing one on that walked viewers through the process of going to undertaker school
Whoa,
um,
really?
in detail. Yes, yeah. Um, so pretty much, you know, whatever the producers that I worked with, you know, were working on at the time and needed a voice for. But I did a lot of that kind of thing for a while.
And that's an actual Undertaker, not to be the Undertaker in the Wrestling Federation, right?
No, that's a It's like how to embalm
Yeah.
101. Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
okay.
They did a show on that. Undertaker School. I think it was called Mortician School or something like that. Yeah, Mortuary School. It was called Mortuary School.
As a, lifelong award-winning journalist and documentary maker, how did you then pick up from San Francisco and move to the Catskill Mountains of New York and start your new
We're
path?
partially, ironically, we're climate refugees.
Oh,
Um, I have to say the biggest draw was family. Um, and this is something you probably encounter a lot when you talk to people sort of in my demographic. I'd been in the Bay Area for 34 years. My partner had been with me for the last 15 of those. And we felt like life in the Bay Area was getting a little oppressive in a lot of ways. The traffic, the cost of living,
yeah.
the crime, the acres and acres of homeless encampments and things. That
Yeah.
it was just hard in some ways to live there, and not as hard as it was for the people in the encampments. It's not their fault,
Right.
but
Right.
it was not the same place that I moved to, in 1986 and thought I'm never leaving here. Um,
Yeah.
and 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 the other thing was, you know, fire season had things like fire
Yeah.
season had become extremely onerous, and
Yeah, scary.
wearing N95 masks for a couple of weeks at a time in the summer and fall. Even if the fire's not right next to you, the smoke would be coming from the Sierra foothills. When the Diablo winds, when the winds turn around in the fall and the Diablos blow everything out to sea, the air quality got really bad. We were at one point. I remember one year we were worse than Beijing, in terms of air
Uh-oh.
quality.
That's not good, yeah.
And they had to invent a new color for the color coded, air quality maps because they didn't have one that was bad enough. And the the ever present. I'm fascinated with seismology, and that was part of my beat too. But the earthquakes were an ever present risk, and there was just a lot about it that, well, like when a holiday weekend came up, that was stay home for us because you
Yeah.
couldn't go anywhere because of the traffic.
Yeah.
So we started thinking about getting out of the Bay Area primarily and getting to a place that was a little, with a little more relaxed, serene lifestyle. But honestly, we sort of wanted to stay out west, but every place we looked, um, was it was either fire country or it was or there going to be water issues. There either were water issues or there were going to be water issues, or
Yeah.
there were areas where the real estate boat had sailed. Any place within a day's drive of the Bay Area, as the real estate prices have gone off the rails, basically.
Yeah.
Um, and so we looked in Southern Oregon, which was rapidly becoming unaffordable. A place like, if you can believe, a place called like Medford, Oregon, was
Medford
already,
is?
yeah.
Wow,
Um,
I thought you were gonna say Bend or someplace like that.
no, it's yeah, it's and
Wow.
we looked in northern New Mexico, even, a lot of different places, But finally, ultimately, family was back here for both of us. We both had aging parents. We didn't feel like we had enough time with them, and we didn't know how much
Yeah.
more time we were going to have with them. So ultimately, we said, let's go home. So
Yeah.
we found this place, this little mountain airy, in the Catskills, and we moved back here in
Are the
2019.
Catskills about what is that, about 3 hours north of New York City or what?
Just right. That's about right. Yeah, if you're driving it, it's just about 3 hours. Yeah.
Okay.
The
Stand-up comedy
Catskills
got its
were
start in the Catskills, yeah, right?
Well,
Kind
I
of.
don't know if it got its start here, but for many decades, it was the summer vacation destination for Jewish families in New York City and
Yeah.
New Jersey and places like that. They'd go to the Catskills, for a week or 2 weeks or whatever in the summer. That was their great escape. And so you had, big resorts like Grossinger's and places that became famous like that, and brought in the stand-up comics, and which was part of the regular entertainment fare, where you had people like Shecky Green and,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and it's just you know uh, there is a legacy there which is pretty much died out now. Most of those resorts are closed,
Oh,
and people started doing different things with their time off. And but the Catskills are coming back. We've noticed just since moving here that it seems to be like one of the new refuges for disaffected Hollywood types.
really?
All places. Yeah, yeah. People are like well-known actors and directors and people like that are like buying up all these places in the Catskills. It's we've become trendy again.
Yes.
So for
The
different
trends
reasons.
follow you. I think
That
that's
must
what.
be it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Okay, so you're up in the Catskills now, and that was you moved there about 3 years ago, I think?
2019. So it's actually more like 4 now. Yeah.
Okay. Do you mind
Mhm.
saying your age when you moved?
I guess I would have been. Let's quickly doing the math. Yeah, I guess I would have been 65-ish. 60. I'll be 69 in a couple of months.
Okay. And you didn't retire, I don't know if you're still doing any radio or broadcasting stuff, but you don't consider yourself retired, but you did kind of find yourself thinking, "This is a little bit lonely because everything's changed and I don't have my normal routine." Is that true?
Well, it's definitely been an adjustment. There's no question about it. There are things, I mean, we have, acreage and woods and a pond and waterfalls and a lake across the street. And we were never going to have that in California, you know.
Yeah.
And the few people who do have that in California, have either had it for generations or they have a lot of money. And
Right. Yeah.
part of it was it was a lifestyle. It's like we knew, we wanted to kind of get out of the. Neither one of us are urban animals, really. We like the country, we like the mountains, and so part of it was just that being the kind of surroundings we wanted to have for this next phase of our life, and we were fortunately in a position when we could do it.
Yeah.
So, but I knew that I never wanted to retire in the traditional sense and go, fishing, or
Right.
play golf or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
and I do neither of those things really.
Yeah.
So in my case, let's say, I don't want to go just kayaking for the rest of my life.
Right.
I love writing. I mean, even through all of the years that I was in journalism, whatever the medium happened to be, radio, TV, internet, whatever, it's the writing really that I enjoyed, probably more than anything. And so I
Hmm.
still do that. Um, and people ask me when I plan to retire, and I say when I die, and take my last breath.
Right.
Up until then, I hope I still, have an outlet, for my writing because it really does feed me. It keeps me connected. It keeps me alive. It keeps me, from atrophying, both mentally and in some cases physically. And it gives me, it helps. It's one of the things that allows me to continue to feel like I'm making a contribution, having a positive effect on the world around me, that I'm not just breathing the air.
Yeah. Yeah. So at one point you realized I'm gonna get more involved, and that's when you decided to become a volunteer firefighter? Or tell me more
The
about
writing,
that.
it's an interesting segue. Great segue, Ryan,
Thank you.
because the writing led directly to the fire service. We
Really?
got here. We learned we're in this tiny rural community. It's all volunteer firefighter. Most firefighters in the United States are volunteers. Most people don't realize that.
Yeah, I did not realize that.
A lot of people don't even realize there's such a thing as volunteer fire. They just assume that we're all paid professionals. Well, we're unpaid professionals, for the most part. I think the latest number I saw was like 65% of firefighters across the country are volunteers, highly trained volunteers, but for the most part, but volunteers. So,
Yeah.
but I was driving around, I would drive by our firehouse and through all the other little towns and counties around here, and every firehouse had a sign outside desperately seeking new, fresh blood, basically, new members, new volunteers. And I'm like, this is interesting. Um, I should write about this, you know.
Yeah.
So I wrote a piece for this PBS website that I write for regularly now called nextavenue.org,
Yeah. Yeah, we're
which
very
is,
aware of that one, yeah.
I imagine so, which is aimed
Yeah.
at 50 plus demographic. Um, and the reason it was such a good fit is because guess who's manning all of these volunteer fire departments? They're all, 50s, 60s, not all of them, but and the reason for that is because we're just not getting the influx of young 20 something and 30 something volunteers for whatever reason. I think the reasons are complicated. We can go through some of them, but so it's the graybeards, and with apologies to the women because we have great women firefighters, the gray heads,
Yeah.
who are
Yeah.
carrying the the whole first responder, fire, emergency medical structure in this country is basically right now is continuing to work on the backs of people who are in my demographic or maybe the next one generation younger.
Yeah.
This is a problem. It's a national crisis. People assume when there's, and because we live in an age going back to climate change again, where there's more and more extreme, weather incidents, weather events, more extreme precipitation, more flooding, more wildfires, and people. We live in a society where people assume that if when they call 911, that help is on the way.
Yeah.
But I think there's a very real danger that we're going to reach a point where we're not going to be able to necessarily assume that
Yeah.
because we're just the volunteer fire and EMS force in this country is aging out. But I wrote about it. I started by writing about it, and then within a year I was like in it.
You were doing within a
I
year
was
you
doing
had the big
it.
suspenders on and you're on a truck.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Well, did I hear that if you call 911, it forwards to your home phone number? Did I hear that right?
Yeah, better not, because people are in real trouble when that starts happening. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, so you wrote about it, and then the next thing you knew, you were like training for it, or what's the next step?
Yeah. Well, from the moment I got here, members of the local fire company were like actively recruiting me, and I was
Okay.
already at that point saying, I don't know, I'm in mid-60s, it's like, and they're like, don't worry about it, we have a job for everybody. You don't have to become, which is true, you don't have to become an interior firefighter, and
Okay.
strap on an air pack and run into burning buildings. Not everybody has to do that, although there is a bit of a shortage of people who can do that and want to do that
Yeah.
right now. But there's so many other paths you can take. There's so many other jobs to be done within the context of a firehouse, or a fire company of any kind. In my case, partly because my partner Heidi was kind of adamant about me not becoming an interior firefighter
Okay.
in my late
Understandable.
60s.
Yeah.
So, an interesting point about that is take a guess at what the number one cause of line of duty deaths is among firefighters.
Your wife being angry at you for signing up? Is that
Heart attack.
heart attack?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It has nothing to do, with getting smoke burned, smoked out or burned out or any of the other myriad of things that can happen to you when you're on a fire incident. Although the heart attacks are often related to the stress and the exertion of the work that needs to be done on the fire ground. But yeah, it's the number one, So it's not necessarily recommended for somebody in my situation who's in my late 60s and on the first name basis with my cardiologist. But it really was. It was a matter of if not me, who?
Right.
Somebody's got to be doing this. And as I was saying, there are other paths you can take, which in my case ended up being driver engineer. So I
Oh,
drive the engine and I operate the pumps. And if I'm in a situation where if I need to pull out a hose, and get on an attack line, as they say, I'm happy to do it. But it's not, or throw a ladder up against a building, or whatever it may be. I'm able to do that and happy to do it. But I think there's a misconception, that everybody who's a firefighter has to like strap on a mask and run into burning buildings. It's not really the case.
Yeah, you don't have to base jump with an axe into a forest or something.
Well, yeah,
There's
you
other
have to do
roles.
that.
Oh, that's the initiation. Okay. Well, wait, tell me a little bit more though about the heart attacks, because I was hoping part of this could be a clarion call, if I'm using that right, for other people who might be interested in becoming volunteer firefighters, but I want to make
I
sure
hope
they
it
don't all have
is.
heart attacks. Yeah, me too.
No, well,
Um,
I hope it is. I hope I didn't scare anybody off with that,
well,
because
yeah,
by saying there were so many other things you can do, so many other ways to contribute, that was an effort to like not scare people off with that.
okay, okay, yeah.
But yeah, it's a limitless number of range of tasks. I cannot believe the learning curve has been remarkable, and I just cannot believe what it takes to smoothly operate, and professionally run a fire company and respond to the calls and do the training. And I mean, it's a lot, and we need all the
Yeah.
help we can get. Yeah.
And there's, like you said, there's a role for everyone. So if you don't want to do one thing, they need this other thing done. So you
That's right. I mean, and there's even a whole if you don't want to do any of that, that's okay too, because there's a whole administrative side.
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, we need a president and a secretary and board members, and there's a whole auxiliary side, which is a division of the fire company that doesn't fight fires. But they're primarily engaged in fundraising for the
Okay.
fire company. And then there's another division called fire police, at least in New York State. They have these people called fire police who are essentially in charge of traffic control at incidents, right? So there's just a whole range of things that you can do. I mean, if all you want to do is go down on Saturday mornings and wash the engines, we would love you for that,
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
what about as far as is there like a 60 plus sexy firefighter calendar? Or and if so, or how do people get involved?
I hope not. Um,
Sounds like it could be a fundraising tool for
Yeah, what was that movie where they did that? Yeah, but they weren't firefighters, but
Oh, I think
um,
I yeah.
yeah,
Were they astronauts or oh, no, no, it was, I know what you're
British
talking
movie,
about.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, the Full
Yeah,
Monty, yeah.
the Full Monty. Yeah, yeah. It's been considered and quickly rejected
Oh,
as a
okay.
potential fundraiser.
Okay,
Yes,
well, we'll put it on the back burner for now.
I look bad enough. I look bad enough in my turnout, which is the term they use for the firefighting apparel, in structural firefighting apparel. If it's not too bad when I have my jacket on, but when I take my jacket off and I'm just standing there in the big trousers with the suspenders, I look like a rodeo clown. So, I don't think there'll be any calendars
Well, tell me,
going out.
without the suspenders, you might end up accidentally on the sexy calendar, 'cause tell me about how those work, because I think most of us think they're just like a
Whoops.
funny part of the costume or something, but they're very useful, right? You have multiple
Lost you
suspenders in
half.
your
Well, I do. I mean, I'm at that age now where actually I'm double suspendered because I quickly found out in the course of my training that if I didn't wear suspenders on my regular trousers underneath my turnout, that they would quickly end up down around my knees, which makes it very difficult to climb in and out of engines and climb ladders and all of the things that are necessary to fight fires.
Yes,
So now I'm
yeah.
actually double suspendered. Yeah, right.
Okay. And you don't actually have to slide down a pole or anything like that, do you?
No, we have no pole. Sadly, we don't even have a second floor.
Oh, so a
So
pole would be kinda useless on
pole would be kind of
one-story
useless. Yeah.
building.
But it is
Okay.
interesting. I mean, it is interesting. The I have to say, I'm amazed. I live right above the firehouse, up the hill from it,
Oh,
and
okay.
so when the siren goes off, I usually come like this, like 2 feet off of my chair or my sofa or wherever I happen to be. Well, the first thing that happens is this goes off. The pagers go
Your
off.
pager.
Which is I'll reset it here so you can. Okay, and then you hear that, And then you hear the series of tones, like you've seen in the movies, beep, 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 and then you hear the
Yeah.
dispatcher come on, who says, Rensselaerville Fire, respond to whatever. And by the time they're saying that, I'm usually halfway out the door. Um,
Oh, okay.
so I think I respond pretty quickly, and I'm never the first guy there. I get down to the firehouse. There's already a couple who always manage to beat me there,
Oh,
and they're both
okay.
my age. So
Wow.
it's like, yeah. So I mean, I'd say I've been pretty impressed with the response, of these
Yeah.
people, these really dedicated people that I work with down there. Yeah,
Yeah, I was
but
gonna say
no, we
because
don't slide down a pole.
well, how does it work? Are you on call at all times, or you have designated days?
You're on call, and in a company my size, we can't afford to have shifts. We need it's all hands on deck every time, right? So we're always on call, quote unquote, but there's no there's no ironclad expectation. No one will ever ask you, at least in my company, no one will ever say, "Where were you?" You know,
Okay,
we had a
okay.
call the other day. You didn't show up. What's the deal? That you'll never hear that in my company,
Yeah,
and especially when you enter the fire service at my age, I learned very quickly that I had to set limitations. I had to create some boundaries for myself, and I know there's things that I can do. There's things that I can't do.
yeah,
There's times when I can go and times when I really shouldn't go. And I had to learn that. And it's taken a long time. I still struggle with it when the pager goes off and I, for some legitimate reason, don't go. Maybe having to do with my own limitations at the moment. Um, it's hard to deal with that, but you have to. You have to set
yeah.
those boundaries and not feel guilty about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so let's say you wanted to take a week off. Do you it sounds like you don't have to, like, put in for vacation, you just don't show up? Is that how it works, or
Yeah.
okay,
Well, I might want
yeah.
to tell, you know, I might want to, we train every Monday night. I might want to mention to my colleagues down there, hey, we're gonna go to the Gulf Coast for the month of February,
Yeah.
so don't look for me. But no, there's no formal, being a volunteer firefighter is like being retired all the time. You go when you
Yeah.
go when you want. You go when you want, and when you don't, yeah, you can go on vacation whenever you want.
I
So
think that might also be appealing to someone that might think about doing it. They don't have to feel pressured that it's like you can't
right.
also live
The
your
only
life.
pressure, I think I can probably speak for most houses. The only pressure you're going to feel is because it's self-imposed, you
Yeah.
know, guilt or whatever, for not going when you think you should be down there supporting your crew. Um, but
Yeah.
you do have to set those boundaries and stick to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say overall it's been very rewarding
One of the
to do?
most gratifying things I've in my life. And I've done a
Really?
lot. As a journalist, I've been able to I've been on TV, I've been nationally, I've been on the deck of an aircraft carrier during flight operations. I've had, because I'm a journalist, I've had access to a lot of things that people, don't normally get access to. I've seen things and done things um, that most people never get to do. But this is this, and I also did a 6-year stint in California on a sheriff's search and rescue team,
Oh,
and that and this, I think, are two of the most gratifying things I've ever done.
wow.
Yeah,
And if you had to say why, it's because of giving back?
yeah. It's because I'm really proud of the contribution that I'm making to the community, and that I'm here to protect the community on their worst, on your worst day. I'm going to be there for you.
Yeah.
For me, that may not float everybody's boat, but for me, it does. For me, it's one of the things that feeds me.
Yeah. Would you say if for someone who feels lonely in that stage of their life, becoming a volunteer firefighter is almost like the jaws of life to get you into happiness?
they, oh, it's actually a great point because as you
Oh,
and I both know, one of the biggest issues with elder Americans is isolation, is social
yeah.
isolation, especially when you move to a small town like this in the middle of nowhere, don't know
Yeah.
anybody. Um, it's a tremendous way to engage with the community, and to get almost immediate respect from people. It's if you just come here and retire, you can it may take you a while to sort of win the trust and the respect of your neighbors. But if you come here and join the fire company, um, you know they they know you're for real.
Yeah.
You know.
We talk to a lot of retirees, and I know you're not a retiree, but they they I think a big problem is when you sometimes you don't go to the office every day, you kinda lose an identity you had, even if you didn't realize that was a big part of it, and, um, but you've changed a lot. Your life has changed a lot since you moved to the Catskill area. So,
Yeah.
how have you either recreated your identity or maybe you didn't, maybe you just kept the same I don't know what you did, but how would you describe that process?
Well, I was able to sort of cheat that a little bit. I was able to sort of cheat that a little bit by the fact that I'm still engaged in journalism.
Mm,
So
mhm.
I haven't really forfeited that part of my identity. Um, but honestly, if you were to say, "What are you?" What do you? If in a word, how would you describe yourself now in terms of your career? I would say I'm a firefighter.
Really?
Yeah.
I love it.
It's become more important to me than all the other things that I do. Um, as much as I love writing, and I'll write until, like I said, until my dying day, I hope. But I really have sort of, yeah. I feel like it has given me a fresh identity, not a substitute identity, but it's provided a fresh identity for me that I really, uh, enjoy, and I'm proud of.
That's so touching to hear. And the contrast to me of this guy sitting in the kind of stereotypical public radio station who's like, "I'm a firefighter," is beautiful. You know? I I like, that would be a great visual
Yeah,
for you if you write a book or
I
something, you're
did.
sitting there, with a cup of coffee, but in, like, a full firefighter suit or something, you know?
there was a there have been a few. NPR has run a few pieces actually about this problem that I described. The volunteer crisis. And I think the last guy that I heard do one he was a volunteer firefighter. So it's
Wow.
definitely top of mind. It's top of mind for us, who are straddling both worlds.
Also, there's something to be said about how you had an open mind to try it.
Well, that's right. And this is something that they teach you when you're training you for search and rescue too, is to get out of your comfort zone. Um, I think like how they say like sitting is the new smoking.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like that. I mean, I think the more you stay embedded in your comfort zone, I think you stop growing in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And you stop, and maybe growing is even not that you stop thriving. You're
Yeah.
existing, but you're not thriving necessarily. And so, oh yeah, I mean, when the pager goes off at 2:30 in the morning and it's 7 degrees outside, it's like I'm in my comfort zone. I'm in bed. I don't want to, but I'll tell you, there are unforeseen rewards, to forcing yourself out of that. You know.
Yeah. Well, kinda as we get towards the end here, Craig, do you have any other core pursuits that which we've kinda coined that term as, like, the hobbies you have that you're very passionate about. Do you have any others, besides volunteering as a firefighter?
The fire service actually takes up a lot. I wouldn't say that in my own case, only because you can. It's another nice thing about volunteering is that you can sort of choose your level of involvement. You can reserve bandwidth for yourself, and as needed or as desired. I've sort of gone all in. So I'm spent a lot of time doing things like writing grants, for the fire
Mm-hmm.
company, and getting involved in fundraisers. And in a couple of, I don't know when you're going to run this, but in a couple of weeks, I'll be driving the Easter Bunny around town in one of the
Wow.
engines, visiting the kids. So,
That's great.
yeah. So it's like, I mean, for how many people get to meet the Easter Bunny? But
Yeah.
so you can kind of like set your own level of involvement like that. And I have to say, for me, it takes up a lot of bandwidth. I give it willingly, but that's kind of become my core pursuit. When you describe it by your definition, which is something beyond just a hobby,
Yeah.
that's really that's the main thing for me right now, I think.
Yeah. It almost feels
I
like
mean, I love to get out on the lake in my kayak, sure, but
right.
I
Oh,
wouldn't
okay.
call it a core pursuit. Yeah.
Well, it almost sounds like your volunteer firefighting is like 3 or 4 core pursuits all in one. And then you love the writing, so
It often
I think it
feels
sounds
that
like you're
way,
covered.
Ryan. It often feels that way.
Yeah. Well, Craig, if
Yeah.
people want to find out more about you or read more about you or about how to become a volunteer firefighter, like do you know where they should go to look?
Well, like in the moment, there's an organization called the National Volunteer Fire Council, which a great start would be to go to their website, and that's just nvfc.org, and there's all sorts of information there. But honestly, the best way is to go down to your local firehouse. If find out when they have their monthly meetings, when they have their trainings, and just show up, just to observe, to ask some questions. It's like the old commercials, no obligation and no salesman will call. You're not. Don't worry, you're not gonna. But that's the best way to gather. It also gives you a sense of the other people, who are already there doing this work, and you can see, what terrific people they are, which is an
Yeah.
attraction too.
And it doesn't come with a mandatory timeshare that you have to pay for the rest of your life. There's
No,
no commitments.
the, the timeshare you pay, the freight you pay is in time. Yes,
Oh.
and
Well, you are a writer.
occasional sleep deprivation.
Okay. Okay. Well, speaking of that, I will let you go. And I really appreciate you coming on the Happiest Retirees podcast, even though you're not a retiree.
And
And
the
I think
happy
you're
part,
happy.
I'm still working on that too. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Aren't we all? All
Yeah.
right. Well, you have a great day.
Okay, you too, Ryan.